On June 23, 2026, a neighbor on Harris Avenue in Mechanicville, New York, noticed an unusual smell coming from one of the apartments in the building. It was the kind of smell that stops you. She called for a welfare check. When officers arrived and got inside Amy Steadman's apartment, they found 6 people dead inside that apartment. Amy Steadman, 64, her daughter, Sarah Myers, 44, and 4 children who had not been seen by anyone outside that building in nearly 2 weeks. Harper Harmon, 13 years old. Hudson Harmon, 11 years old. Gavin and Gracelynn Harmon, 10 years old. Gavin and Gracelynn were twins. The bodies had been there since June 10, 13 days. The decomposition was significant enough that identifying them was difficult for the responding officers. The cause of death was not immediately clear, but what investigators found inside that apartment, the medications, the handwritten notes, the letters, pointed immediately in a specific direction. Within weeks, Mechanicville Police Chief Bill Rabbit confirmed what the evidence was already saying. This was not a tragedy. It was a plan. On August 4, 2026, standing at a press conference alongside New York State Police, Rabbit told the public what his investigators had spent 7 weeks building from text messages, pharmacy records, internet searches, and the words of a 10-year-old girl who had texted someone what was being done to her while it was being done. Amy Steadman and Sarah Myers conspired in planning and carrying out the murders of the 4 children before taking their own lives. Their names were Harper, Hudson, Gavin, and Gracelynn. The 4 of them had grown up together in Mechanicville, New York, 2 kids and a set of twins. Harper was the oldest at 13. Hudson was 11. And Gavin and Gracelynn 10. Their father, Brady Harmon, last saw them on November 2019. By the time their bodies were found on June 23, 2026, Brady Harmon had not seen those children in person for 6.5 years. Sarah Myers was 44 years old, a mother who had, by the accounts available in the public record, been involved in a protracted and bitter custody dispute for 6 years. One that she had, until June 2026, been winning through obstruction and noncompliance rather than through the courts. Brady Harmon and Sarah Myers separated in November 2019. The divorce, filed in Utah's 3rd District Court, listed the grounds as irreconcilable differences. Sarah Myers was awarded physical custody of the children during the school year. Brady was awarded uninterrupted time with them during the summer months, July through September. He was also awarded regular video phone calls, holidays, and birthdays. He was paying $500 a month in child support. On paper, it was a structured, functional custody arrangement designed with the children's well-being at its center. In practice, it was something else entirely. What investigators found when they examined her digital records was a collection of materials she had assembled that she described as documenting abuse, photographs appearing to show injuries to herself and to some of the children, text messages, handwritten materials alleging violence by Brady Harmon. Mechanicville Police Chief Bill Rabbit addressed these materials directly at the August 4th press conference. Investigators had reviewed everything carefully, he said. They could not independently verify the circumstances surrounding the alleged incidents. The allegations of abuse were not corroborated by anything in the divorce paperwork, by any domestic violence reports on record, or by anything investigators could confirm through independent evidence. Brady Harmon denied all allegations. "I was raised better," he told reporters. "I treat women with respect. I would never do anything like that." Amy Steadman was 64 years old, Sarah's mother, the grandmother of the 4 children. She lived in the same apartment building as Sarah. Brady Harmon would later tell reporters he had not seen his children in person since November 2019. He said Sarah Myers had blocked all contact. He said every attempt he had made, legally, through attorneys, through the courts, to exercise his custody rights had been obstructed. There was no mention of domestic violence in the publicly available divorce paperwork. No allegations of abuse appear in the divorce filings. The stated reason for the dissolution of the marriage was irreconcilable differences, nothing more. By June 2026, Brady had finally secured what the court had originally ordered. A Utah judge had signed a new custody order and issued a motion to enforce against Myers, who had been ordered to appear in Utah court on June 29 for failing to comply with the terms of the divorce. 2 continuous months of summer custody were finally on the schedule. Brady was booked to fly to New York on June 30th to pick the children up. July 1st through September 1st, they were going to Utah. They were going to meet his new family. He had been preparing for months. He had waited 6.5 years. He was few days away. While Brady Harmon was counting down to the moment he would see his children again, something was happening on Harris Avenue in Mechanicville that he had no way to know about. The text messages between Sarah Myers and her mother Amy Steadman had started, according to investigators, as far back as June 5th, 5 days before the murders. The planning had already begun. What the children's daily lives looked like during those final weeks, what Harper was thinking about at 13, what Hudson was into at 11, what the twins were doing that summer before everything stopped, the public record does not fully tell us. We know they were alive. On June 10, 2026, Brady Harmon had a scheduled phone call with his children. He had these calls regularly, court-ordered contact that Myers was supposed to facilitate. He expected to hear their voices. That morning, Sarah Myers sent him a message. The children were sick, she said. They couldn't talk today. She would have them call him tomorrow. He accepted it. She had said they would talk the next day. He waited. The next day came. No call. He tried to reach out. No response. He kept trying over the following days. Nothing. By the time June 23rd arrived, and a neighbor smelled something coming from Amy Steadman's apartment, Brady Harmon had been attempting to make contact with his children for 13 days. On June 10th, while Sarah Myers was telling Brady the children were too sick to talk, she and her mother were carrying out a plan they had been building for 5 days. The children were already in that apartment. The medications had already been purchased. The schedule had already been set. The phone call Brady Harmon was expecting at 6 p.m. that evening was the reason the murders had been timed for between 10:30 in the morning and noon. They wanted to be finished before he called. Before we walk through what the text messages showed and what the children experienced inside that apartment, there is something that needs to be said plainly about the framing Sarah Myers and Amy Steadman used to justify what they were planning. They called it protection. In their texts, in their letters, in the materials Sarah Myers had assembled, the consistent language was that they were keeping the children safe, that sending those 4 children to Utah, to Brady Harmon, was more dangerous than what they were about to do to them. Chief Rabbit addressed this framing without softening it. Whatever they believed justified their actions, the deliberate murder of 4 children cannot be described as protection. Hold that. Because what the text messages show, and what one of those children texted while it was happening, is that no amount of framing changes what this was. When the neighbor's welfare check brought Mechanicville officers to Harris Avenue on June 23rd, the scene inside Amy Steadman's apartment confronted them with the decomposed bodies of 6 people. The level of decomposition made identification difficult. The New York State Police Crime Scene Unit was called in immediately. Among the items found at the scene, medications, handwritten letters, and a note that initially led investigators to focus on Amy Steadman as the primary suspect. That working theory shifted as the full scope of the evidence was processed. Investigators pulled the text message records between Sarah Myers and Amy Steadman. What they recovered was a documented operational plan, specific, detailed, and chilling in its clarity. The planning had been underway since at least June 5th. 5 days of messages, working through logistics, pharmacy runs, timing, the scheduled 6 p.m. call with Brady that set the deadline. Investigators confirmed that Amy Steadman made several purchases at pharmacies in the days leading up to June 10th. The intended method was poisoning. On the morning of June 10th, the medications were administered. It did not go as planned. One of the messages sent that morning read, "It's not working, we need another option." The spine of this investigation is a documented conversation between two adults who planned the murder of 4 children in writing, in detail, across multiple days. The messages covered every logistical element: medications, location, timing, method of administration, what to tell the children, how to avoid suspicion. The instruction to administer the medications between 10:30 a.m. and noon so they could be finished before Brady's 6 p.m. call is not a message written in emotional crisis. It is operational planning. Scheduled. Deliberate. 10-year-old Gavin Harmon was fatally stabbed, according to police, while trying to protect himself. His body showed defensive wounds, injuries consistent with a child who fought to protect himself. The stabbing occurred, according to investigators, when the poisoning was not achieving its intended effect quickly enough. In the days leading up to the murders, Amy Steadman searched for information about medication reactions, and specifically for where the most fatal place to stab a person is. That search was conducted before the poisoning failed and before Gavin was stabbed. It was not reactive. It was preparation for the possibility that the medications would not be sufficient on their own. Why would you do that? "You both won't let me puke." That message, sent by a 10-year-old Gracie while she was being poisoned, is the most devastating single piece of evidence in this entire case. It establishes that Gracelynn knew what was being done to her, that she was in pain, that she tried to resist it, and that the adults in that room continued anyway. The response, "Gracie is aware," establishes that both adults were present, both were aware of the child's distress, and neither stopped. Found in the apartment alongside the bodies were letters and handwritten materials, part of the documentation Sarah Myers had assembled around the abuse allegations. These materials were reviewed by investigators and could not be independently verified. The divorce papers on record made no mention of domestic violence. The murders occurred 21 days before Brady was scheduled to arrive in New York, 21 days before the first day of his court-ordered summer custody. Myers was also scheduled to appear in Utah court on June 29th for failing to comply with the custody arrangement. The timing placed the killings just weeks after the custody agreement had been finalized and days before a court hearing over Brady's attempt to enforce that agreement. When Brady Harmon couldn't reach his children, he pushed. He contacted Myers. She kept deferring. The children were sick. They would call tomorrow. Each day that passed without contact carried its own particular anxiety for a man who had spent 6 years being kept from his kids, but it was also the kind of deferral that, in the context of their history, didn't read as immediately alarming. Myers had obstructed contact before. He had learned to wait, to go through lawyers, to use the court system. But Brady didn't simply wait. As the days passed without hearing from the children, he requested welfare checks at the apartment. Police went to the residence on multiple occasions. But each time, no one answered the door and officers found no one at the apartment. Brady still had no contact with his children and no way of knowing what was happening inside. He was scheduled to be on a plane to New York on June 30th. He had a court order. He had a signed custody agreement. He had been through every legal avenue available to him. There was nothing in the pattern of what Sarah Myers had done before that prepared him for what she had actually done this time. The welfare check on June 23rd was not called in by Brady Harmon. It was called in by a neighbor who noticed a smell. He found out the same way the rest of the world did, when Salt Lake City police officers came to his door in Utah to tell him, "I just never thought that someone would go and do this," he told reporters. "I went from I'm seeing my kids to I'll never see my kids again." He was scheduled to fly to New York in 7 days. His children had been dead for 13. There is a specific kind of cruelty in the framing Sarah Myers and Amy Steadman built around what they were planning, calling it protection, assembling photographs and letters to document an argument for why the children couldn't go to Utah, building a narrative that positioned murder as rescue. Chief Rabbit named it directly. Murder cannot be described as protection. That is the correct framing. And it needs to be stated again, clearly, in the context of what Gracelynn Harmon texted while it was happening. A child being poisoned does not experience it as being kept safe. A 10-year-old boy fighting back against being stabbed is not experiencing rescue. Whatever Sarah Myers and Amy Steadman told themselves, what the children experienced was harm, administered deliberately in a planned sequence by the two adults who were supposed to be the last people in the world capable of doing this to them. The abuse allegations against Brady Harmon may have been genuine beliefs held by Myers and Steadman. Investigators could not verify them. Brady denies them. Nothing in the divorce record supports them. But even if one accepts, for the sake of argument, that the allegations contain some truth, what was done to those 4 children on June 10th was not a response to abuse. It was its own category of harm. Irreversible, catastrophic, carried out on children who did not choose it and did not consent to it, and, in at least one case, actively tried to stop it. There will be no arrest in this case. There will be no trial. Sarah Myers and Amy Steadman are dead. The investigation Mechanicville police have conducted since June 23rd, 7 weeks of processing text messages, pharmacy records, internet searches, forensic evidence, and the recovered letters, has produced findings and conclusions that will never be tested in a courtroom because there is no defendant to put in one. What Chief Rabbit presented on August 4th was the result of that investigation. A formal conclusion that both women conspired together, planned together, carried out the murders together, and then took their own lives inside the same apartment where the children died. Brady Harmon learned the investigation's conclusions the same way he learned about his children's deaths, through news reports and law enforcement contact. He told WRGB, "My kids suffered. To poison them and also to stab them. There's a special place in hell for people like that." He had been through every legal avenue available. He had court orders. He had compliance hearings pending. He had a plane ticket for June 30th. "I wish there was something else I could have done legally," he told WNYT. "But I went through everything I could. I just never thought that someone would go and do this." The custody timeline in this case raises questions that the investigation, as of August 2026, has not fully answered, and that no criminal trial will ever formally address. Brady Harmon had been attempting to enforce his parental rights for 6 years. He had court-ordered contact that Myers had obstructed. He had gone through attorneys, through motions, through a Utah judge who ultimately signed a compliance order and scheduled Myers for a June 29th court appearance. The court system, in the end, produced a mechanism that would have brought the children to Utah. What the system could not account for was the possibility that a parent would respond to losing a custody battle by ensuring no one won it. Chief Rabbit's press conference was precise. The investigation is ongoing. The findings are preliminary in some respects. But the text messages are what they are. The pharmacy records are what they are. Gavin's defensive wounds are what they are. And Gracelynn's text exists in the public record now, preserved and documented, a 10-year-old girl asking why, in the final hours of her life. Harper Harmon was 13. She was a year from high school. Hudson was 11. Gavin and Gracelynn were 10. They all died on the same day in the same room. Their father last saw them in person November 2019. For children, the oldest was 6 years old then. The youngest was 4 years old. Brady Harmon had spent 6.5 years trying to get back to those children. The legal system eventually gave him the opportunity to. He was few days from the door. This is what it costs when the person controlling a child's access to their other parent decides that losing that control is an unacceptable outcome. Not just for the parent who loses access, for the children who never got to choose any of it. Brady Harmon has been speaking publicly since his children's deaths because, he said, he wants people to know who they were, not just how they died. He has shared photographs. He has spoken about the trip he was planning, the family he was going to introduce them to, the summer they were supposed to have together. He told reporters he was taking it day by day, that there were no words for what he was carrying, that he had gone through every legal channel available to him, and he had never imagined it would end like this. Brady was supposed to bring his 4 children home to Utah for their court-ordered summer visit just 8 days later. Instead, he was left planning their funerals and trying to figure out how to move forward after losing all 4 of his children. The children's extended family, on both sides, are left with the particular grief of this case, which has no courtroom, no verdict, no sentence, and no ending that resolves into justice. Just 4 children who are gone, a father who is still standing, and a community in Mechanicville that is still trying to understand what happened on Harris Avenue. Harper, Hudson, Gavin, Gracelynn, those 4 names should be what people remember when they hear this story. Not the method, not the planning, not the framing their mother and grandmother constructed around it. The children who had their whole lives ahead of them. This case has already prompted conversations in New York and nationally about parental alienation, custody enforcement, and what the legal system can and cannot do when one parent systematically obstructs the other's court-ordered access. Those conversations matter. The gaps they expose are real. But the case at the center of them is 4 children, and a father who will live for the rest of his life knowing he was almost there. Gracelynn Harmon was 10 years old. She texted someone during what was being done to her and asked why. She asked why they wouldn't let her puke. Whatever the adults believed they were accomplishing, Gracelynn herself was experiencing it as something she wanted to stop. Her brother was 10. He was stabbed during the attack, left with injuries that showed he had fought to survive. He was a child, caught in a situation he could not understand and could not escape. And in the end, he died alongside his siblings, not because they had done anything wrong, but because the adults responsible for protecting them had decided their lives were expendable. If you found this story touching, please consider sharing it with someone else. And if you haven't already, subscribe. It helps us continue telling the stories that deserve to be remembered, not for the crimes that ended them, but for the lives that came before. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.